bit easier. Before we jump in on the actual exam paper questions, I just want to go over two important concepts that I think apply to this module, at least I found came up quite a lot. The first one is the rule of law, or the principle of legality, and the other one being the separation of powers. I found that these two seem to come up quite a lot. So I just want to run through those very, very briefly. I'm not sure, have you guys managed at all to be able to read through the prescribed book? I know it's quite chunky, but have you guys managed to go through a large portion of it, or are you still trying to perhaps work your way through it?
I'm still working my way through it.
That's it. Now, I found that the textbook itself was quite large. It's a good couple of hundred pages. I think the first half was something like 500 or 600 pages. So it is quite a chunky textbook to go through. All right. Okay, so the rule of law I found comes up quite a lot. And then when I did my exam last semester, it also came up, and I was very thankful that I at least worked through that concept. So the rule of law in our South African context, Section 2 of the Constitution is what we call the supremacy clause, and it says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So any law that's inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid. So the rule of law is quite important because everything is based around that principle. So what does the rule of law mean? I mean, we always hear people talking about it's the rule of law, they violated the rule of law, we hear it in the news, and so on. In a nutshell, it means that the government must have the authority provided by a law for everything it does. So it can't just randomly decide to do something or decide to exercise some sort of authority or power. It has to be enabled by a provision in law in order to enable it to do that. So that's what we call a rule of law. They can't just decide, hey, today everyone's got to wear flip-flops because that's the new law. You know, they can't do that. So the state cannot exercise power over anyone unless there is a law that permits him to do so. So this is what we call the principle of legality. It could literally, my little note that I've written down is, it can be summed up as the government may only exercise, or the government may exercise no power and perform no function beyond that conferred upon them by law. In other words, they're constrained by the law and they can only do what the law allows them to do. So it's what we call the principle of legality. If you've done administrative law, you will know that they have the concept of intra vires and ultra vires, meaning you acted within the law or you acted outside of the law. So that's where the principle of legality comes in, is we need to make sure that whatever happens, it happens within the confines of the law. And this module is very pedantic about having case law. So I even have a case law for this one. If we're talking about the principle of legality, case law that directly relates to this is the Federal Life Assurance versus the Greater Johannesburg Metro. In paragraph 56, the judge actually says there that government may only act within the powers lawfully confirmed upon it. So that's quite a handy one to keep around if you've got a pen and paper. That's the Federal Life Assurance versus the Johannesburg Transitional Metro at paragraph 56. I actually ended up having to use it in my exam because they were asking about legality and the principles of it, and this actually came in very, very handy. So that's the principle of legality. The government has to act within the confines of the law. The other one that I found comes up quite a lot, and they do ask you about this, is separation of powers. So they'll ask you, well, what is the separation of powers? What are the different branches of the state? I've just summed it up fairly, I suppose, briefly in a couple of points. The three branches of the state are the... Does anyone perhaps want to take a stab at it and see if they can get the three branches of the state before I mention them? Anyone brave enough? Oh, no one brave enough. All right, so the three branches of state are the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So the executive is the president and his cabinet, and that is established in the Constitution in Chapter 5. The legislature includes the National Council of Provinces and Parliament, and that is established under Chapter 4 of the Constitution. And then we have the judiciary, which is your judges, courts, and administration of justice. And they are established under Chapter 8 of the Constitution. If you have a pen and paper, you can perhaps take some notes, because these do come up. They'll ask you, for instance, where does the executive get their power from? So we know already it's in Chapter 5, so we can shoot over to that chapter, and then we can find out what powers the president has. The same thing with the judiciary. They'll sometimes ask you, where does the judiciary get their power from? And we know straight away it's in the Constitution. We can jump to Chapter 8, and then we can find out exactly which section deals with that. So it's the three branches are the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So if they ever ask you a question about the three branches of state, which I'm sure they will, a lot of the past exams seem to revolve around that, just remember it's those three. Another important thing when it comes to separation of powers is that each branch is independent from the other. So, and I'm going to be including a lot of the sections in the Constitution, because with this module, Professor Lee is very pedantic about we need to include the Constitution, and she wants to know right down to like the section number. Sorry, can that person that just joined perhaps mute their mic? I've got an echo coming through. Thank you. All right. So for each branch is independent. We're going to talk about, for instance, the court's independence is guaranteed under Section 165, where the Constitution says that they are independent. For the legislative or the parliamentary side of things, Section 43 vests all republic legislative power within Parliament. And Section 85 vests all executive authority in the President. So that's Section 165 deals with the courts, Section 43 deals with Parliament, and Section 85 deals with the President. So those are the three sections that establish their powers and parameters. Important to note when we're talking about separation of powers is that one branch of the state cannot interfere in another branch's constitutional mandate. In other words, one branch can't interfere in another one's area of authority. So if we looked up like Section 165 for the courts, it'll say, the independence of the courts is guaranteed and all judicial matters vest in the court, meaning we can't have another branch coming interfering in the judicial aspect of their function. So for instance, the courts don't make law, they enforce it. Parliament doesn't administer the day-to-day functions of running the country. They make the laws that determine how it should be governed. Likewise, the executive doesn't tell Parliament what it wants them to do. It merely implements the laws passed by Parliament and handles the day-to-day running of the country. So the three different branches each have different aspects and different, we could call it specialities. They focus on a different area. So, for instance, Parliament's focus is on making laws that govern the country. They represent the people in the country and they give a voice to everyone in the country. The executive is in charge of the basic day-to-day running of the country. That's why they're making policy and they're giving direction, and they have the different government departments that they oversee. And the courts, their job is not to run the country, it's not to make law, it's merely to adjudicate on matters in dispute. So if there's a problem with the law or if someone has a run-in with the law, their job is merely to interpret the law and to apply the law. So they don't make law. The caveat with that one is courts are empowered to develop the common law with constitutional principles, but they don't make new law. They merely develop the existing common law, or they will develop the legislation to interpret the legislation to be in line with constitutional principles. But anyway, those are the two main ones that I found came up quite a lot: the principle of legality and then the separation of powers, spheres of state. Do those two sections make sense? Maybe we can, if there are any questions, we'll answer them now before we move on to the actual questions from the past paper. Right. I don't see any questions coming up. I see a hand raised. T. Durangwa. Oh, I'm probably pronouncing your name very wrong, but I see your hand up. Do you have a question? T. Durangwa, do you have a question? I see your hand is up.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Good evening. I just wanted to ask about the rule of law. I'm not so sure. I don't understand it at all. So I realized that you just passed by. You didn't explain a lot about it. So I just wanted to ask if you can just explain a little about it.
All right. Okay, so the rule of law is dealing with what can and can't government do. So when we say the rule of law, we're specifically talking about the principle of legality. In other words, the government is only allowed to exercise the power if there's a law that allows them to do that. So, for instance, if they decide to issue fines to vehicles because of exceeding the speed limit, they can do that because there is a traffic offences law that allows them, that gives government the power to fine drivers for exceeding the speed limit. But for instance, if we didn't have a traffic offences law and then they decided that they wanted to fine a driver, they wouldn't be able to do that because there's no law that empowers government to do that. So when we talk about the rule of law, what we mean is that the state is not allowed to do anything unless there's legislation or the constitution or some law gives them the power to do that. Otherwise, they are acting what we call ultra vires. They're acting outside of the law. There's no legislation or law that gives them the power to do what they want to do. I don't know, does that perhaps help explain it a bit? Perfect. Some of these concepts, even for myself, I had to read over a couple of times just to understand them. So don't be disheartened if you do read over something you don't understand the first time around. Just keep reading over it until it makes sense. So even, for instance, the principle of legality, even for myself, I only really got that one before the exam. I think the week of the exam when I was prepping for it that I really nailed down what it is. And for myself, what I ended up summing it up for was that the principle of legality is the government may exercise no power and perform no function beyond that conferred upon them by law. So they can't do anything unless a law gives them the power to do it. So in any case, I ended up on that week of exam prep was when I actually nailed down quite a few of these things. So don't feel disheartened if some of it doesn't make too much sense. Awesome. Are there any other questions about separation of powers or the rule of law before we move on?
Sorry, Darren. I just have a question. Besides the Virtual Life Assurance Limited and others, or versus Greater Johannesburg Transitional Metropolitan Council and others, is there any other case law we can refer to?
I think there were two other cases. One involved the EFF versus the Speaker, I think it was.
Or
But
the
I don't have that.
2016 one?
It might be that one or the one before, or I
There's
think
one
there was
here, the economic freedom fighters versus the Speaker of the National Assembly 2016.
Yeah, let me just see. I might have it here because I was only bringing out one for each one as an example. Let me just see if I have perhaps put it in my notes.
I have the Virtual Life
There we go.
Assurance. I have the what is this? Freedom EFF, the EFF one, and then I have Corruption Watch NPC, and Ngasana versus Corruption Watch.
Okay, so I did include the other one here. So the other one that I've got down that deals with the principle of legality is the Democratic Alliance versus the eThekwini municipality. That is the 2011 case. And on that one, I've actually marked paragraph 21, where it actually says that the fundamental principle deriving from the rule of law itself is that the exercise of all public power, be it legislative, executive, or administrative, is only legitimate when lawful. So all of that are actually marked down for the rule of law. So that's the Democratic Alliance versus eThekwini Municipality, 2011.
Okay.
And then further on in that paragraph, it even says that the principle of legality not only requires that the decision must satisfy all legal requirements, it also means the decision should not be arbitrary or irrational. So that was quite important. I think as well there was one about the pharmaceutical manufacturers, but I'd have to double check on that one. But those two I have got in my notes here.
Okay. No, I also have the same here. I just wanted to just maybe check if maybe you've got more than what I have.
Yeah, no, once I started looking up case law, it actually became quite fun because I started writing down different headings. I ended up getting something for rationality, separation of powers, provincial powers, and so on. And I just started collecting. It actually became quite fun afterwards. But yeah, so those are the two that I've got written down here. But I do know that there was one for pharmaceuticals as well.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So how many did you end up finding? Did you find more than me? I think I only found maybe 3 that I ended up looking for.
Let me check. Sorry, I'm going through my notes, manual notes. We are talking about the rule of law, right?
Yeah, the rule of law.
Rule of law. Oh, sorry, I've got flu.
But it sounds good. It obviously sounds like you got quite a few notes there, which is always good.
Oh yeah, so I've got the federal assurance, EFF, that's the second one. Then corruption watch, NPC. Then that's 3. Oh yeah, I've got 3. I didn't add the DA one. So the others that I have like the D Lange. That one is for separation of power.
Okay, yes. Oh, that's not bad. You've got 3 there. 3 is always good. For this module, I normally recommend try and aim for, the bare minimum would be 1 case law, but 2 or 3 is better because it shows the lecturers that you understand the work and that you had a bit of research for it. So when I was doing my notes and that, I tried to aim for 2 to 3 cases for each different topics. I had a couple of different topics. I had like separation of powers, rationality, rule of law, provincial powers, and I tried to find 2 to 3 cases just so that if it was asked in the exam, I'd at least have a ballpark of where to start. Nothing worse than being in the exam and then trying to do legal research. It's that's stressful.
Okay, no, got it. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, anybody else have any other questions about the cases or those 2 topics before we move on? Yeah, looks like we're set. Right, so now we're going to move more on. I've made a couple of notes that I found are important for this module. So just for interest, this module is a 4-hour exam and it's proctored using the Invigilator app. So if you haven't used the Invigilator app before, I'm sure you must have by now in second year, but if you haven't, you need to download it. You need to register and make sure that you can sign in. Can everybody hear me? I see Microsoft Teams is telling me that it was having a problem connecting.
So what's the question?
I was just wondering if everyone can hear me because I see Teams kept popping up telling me that there was having a problem connecting to the server.
No, you can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, no, that's perfect. All right. Thanks, guys. So it's a 4-hour exam. It sounds like a lot of time, but it isn't. I was under the wire with the 4 hours. It was quite stressful. I ended up with a nice migraine at the end of it. But it's 4 hours. It uses the Invigilator app. So you need to plan your time quite well. What I would recommend is I've seen past papers where they do 4 and 5 questions. Try and divide your time up amongst those ones. So for instance, if you have 4 questions, try and aim for like 40, maybe 50 minutes maximum per question, just so that you can stay on track with time and then have a little bit of time left over in case you have to brush up with anything. I found for myself, I had a watch with me and I actually marked it in. So like the first question, by the time I got to that 35-minute mark, I was like, you know what, I now need to start wrapping up and moving on. Otherwise, what will end up happening is maybe the first 2 questions, you spend 3/4 of your time, which is only worth maybe 40% of your marks. And then by the time you realize with the timers, you don't have a lot of time left to carry on. So maybe keep a watch with you or your phone or something along those lines just to keep track. I would say aim for maybe 40 to 50 minutes question. And then perhaps what you need to do is if you run out of time, is wrap the question up as neatly as you can, then move on to the next one and then come back because the questions have different mark ratings for them. So you don't want to go and spend, you know, a whole hour on a question only worth 15 marks when perhaps the other ones are worth 25 marks. So I just found time on this one was quite a challenge. If you can, I would suggest finishing maybe 5 or 10 minutes before the end of the exam. So if your exam starts at 8, maybe try and finish at like 5 to or 10 to 12. The reason I say that is sometimes there's technical difficulties where all the students finish at the same time and everyone tries to upload on my exams at the same time. Then there are a few hiccups because they only give you half an hour's grace to upload. So my rule of thumb is always try and finish about 10 minutes beforehand so that I can make sure that everything is sorted. Now, I haven't had a problem as yet. So maybe just look at, if you can, I mean, I know some people aren't able to finish earlier, but even if you can finish 5 minutes early, at least it gives you a little bit more time to upload your exam. And then don't forget, on the Invigilator app, you only have 10 minutes grace period to take photos of your exam script to upload. So the first and foremost thing you do is don't worry about my exams. Once you are finished your exam, you click the button to say I'm finished on the app. And then take pictures of your answer script on your screen, wherever it is. You must take pictures of every single page, and then you upload that. And because they only give you 10 minutes, you need to make sure that you do the Invigilator app first and foremost. Once you've uploaded your script on the Invigilator app, you can then move to the My Exams app or the My Exams site, because they give you half an hour. So there's a lot more room for error there than on the Invigilator app. Because if you miss the 10-minute mark on the Invigilator app, they will mark you as absent from the exam because you failed the proctoring tool. So you don't want to go through 4 hours and then miss it by like 1 minute or 30 seconds. So make sure the moment you finish your exam, you straight on the Invigilator app, take your pictures and then upload. All right. Also with the CSL exam, usually Professor Lee tells you that they don't want any cover page. They just want like your name and student number, the same as what they did on the assignment. So at least that point is fairly easy. And also they don't use a bibliography, so it saves you a bit of work. What they want is what they call detailed footnotes. So we need to include as much detail as we can on our footnotes. They like you to go down to like the paragraph number, the page number, the subsection number of whatever the law is. They don't just want you to say section 54 of the Constitution. They want you to say section 54, subsection 1, paragraph A says ABC. So you need to make sure that you give quite a lot of detail. And then the same thing when you reference case law. Don't just say it was EFF1 versus whatever the case might be. You need to say it was EFF1 at paragraph 27. Otherwise, you will lose a lot of marks for that one, which is why I mentioned a bit earlier when I pulled up my case law, I even made note of the actual paragraphs that were applicable to whatever the topic is that I was talking about. So like the one for legality, it was paragraph 27 or whatever the case was, because you don't want to just say if that doesn't count and you'll lose a lot of marks.
Sorry, Darren, are you saying...
Okay, so how to...
Sorry, man. Are you saying if I say,
Yes.
for instance, the economic freedom fighters on the rule of law, and I say the economic freedom fighter versus the Speaker of the National Assembly 2016, and then I say states that the fact of the case state that, or it highlights that where the rule of law was violated, and I just continue. Are you saying if I don't specify the subsection, I will lose marks?
Yeah, because they want to know what paragraph that is. So you can quote that, but then you need to reference the paragraph. So that was paragraph 72, for instance. You can't just say the case. They want to know the paragraph as well.
Oh God, I'm in for it. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why when I was mentioning the previous ones, I said, like, for instance, it was a paragraph 27, it was a paragraph 54. So you need to make a note of which paragraph is relating to the particular topic, whether it was the rule of law, etc. So when you do your footnote for the exam and you're talking about the rule of law, you can say it was economic freedom fighters versus the speaker, paragraph 27. That'll all go in the footnote. And then in the main part of your essay, you can still do what you were talking about now. The court said A, B, C, they held this. Just in your footnote, you need to have the paragraph number because they are looking for that. I know last year when Professor Lee held, I think it was the 2 days before, she held like a little sort of exam prep class. She made a particular point to say that, you need to include the paragraph number, the subsection number. You mustn't just say the case. So it is important to keep that in mind.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can do that now as well. When you're going through your notes, you can perhaps just brush up on the EFF1 and then just have a squiz through and see, oh, okay, it was paragraph, whatever the case is. At least when it comes to the exam, you have a starting point to work from. You don't have to try and read through the whole case, because that would be quite stressful.
Okay. Thanks for the tips.
Perfect. Okay, so when it comes to answering the actual exam questions, the first and foremost thing you've got to identify is the constitutional issue at play. This module is constitutional law. So what they're wanting to see is, can you identify the constitutional issue in this particular scenario? Because 3 to 4 of the questions will be a scenario based, and usually your first question is like for less marks, but it's like true or false. So for that one, you don't really have to write a lot. But for the other 3 to 4 questions, you've got to identify the constitutional principle in the actual scenario. So it's very important, because if you identify the wrong thing, your whole answer is going to be wrong. So it's important to clarify exactly what the principle is at play. And the key thing for this one is to always start with the Constitution. Don't start with legislation and common law and all that. The first thing we need to do is, once we've found out what the constitutional issue is, we need to then find the particular section in the Constitution that relates to that one. So first things first, this is the principle. Next thing, what section in the Constitution deals with this particular principle that we're with. So we'll start with Constitution first. Once you've got the Constitution down, you can then include other sources, or include case law next. So it's Constitution first, then case law, and then if you do need other sources, it will be your common law, international law, African customary law, etc. But the 2 most important ones that they're always looking for is the Constitution and case law. So always make sure whenever you start answering the question, first things, where in the Constitution can I get my authority for my answer? And then followed by, what case law backs up my answer? So Constitution first, then case law, and if you need something else, you can then go and look for legislation, etc. But the Constitution needs to be the first thing that you focus on. So yeah, last notes for that before we get in. What I would recommend is take a bit of time and go research cases that involve the different topics. So for instance, open up your spreadsheet or your piece of paper and write down the topics. You could have topics for separation of powers, principle of legality, the supremacy of the Constitution, rationality, and so make a couple of different topics. And if you find case law that deals with the find 3 different deal with that, and then make a note of it. And then also remember, you need the paragraph number. You can't just for equity versus Toyota manufacturing. It needs to be equity versus Toyota manufacturing, paragraph 37, for instance. So I found that this helped me quite a lot. The week of the exam, I just started researching left, right, and center. I had a list of topics. It was like separation of powers, principle of validity, rationality, so on. And then I tried to find as many cases as I could for that one. And then you just have to write the case name and the paragraph number, and perhaps the maybe a copy of the paragraph that you are talking about, so that when you need to use it, you can look through your notes and see, right, that's the case I was looking for, that's the paragraph, and you've got the context and everything. And this will help you a lot when it comes to the exam, because instead of wasting precious time trying to research for cases, you'll have all of them done for you in your headings. I found that this made things a lot easier when I was trying to find case law. All right. Okay, so the last part I've got a note on here is for the essay questions. So most of the questions in the exam, or for the most amount of points, are all essays. So you can't do bullet points. They don't accept bullet points. So what I normally, for myself, when I'm answering an essay, what I'll normally try and do is, when I've identified what it is that they're asking, what principles we're talking about, I will then put in some headings on my Word document. So I'll put in, for instance, introduction, I'll put in conclusion, and then I'll put in like 3 or 4 other points. So it might be like the rule of legality in the Constitution and case law and Constitution, whatever those other points might be. Put those headings in, and it gives you a structure to start filling in. And then what I do for myself is I put some rough work under each of those headings, just some notes like, oh, I must cover this, oh, section 34 of the constitutional work here. So I just fill in some rough work under each of those headings. So it gives me a place to start. I'll then go back now and say, right, introduction, let's type something up. And then I'll go to the next point, and then I'll use my rough work to create the paragraphs for that section. So I know some people do it in different ways. For myself, I found that putting in the headings for the essay just helped me visualize where I was going and structuring it out. But I mean, you can do it in any which way you want, but if you are battling to how do I do an essay, start by putting headings in. At least you get something on the page, and then fill in information as you go along. But the important thing is to always start with the Constitution. It should be the very first thing that we referenced, followed by case law, and then if we need to do anything else, we can follow up with legislation. Some people are asking, how many words do you put on a page for a mark, or how long does it have to be? Professor Lee mentioned that 10 marks is roughly about half a page to 1 page worth of work. So if you're thinking, am I too short, am I too long, 10 marks is about half a page to 1 page worth of work. So on an exam of 100 marks, we'd be looking at roughly about 10 pages worth of work. Obviously, those are just estimates. As long as you answer the question in a coherent fashion, you won't lose marks if you are slightly shorter. I see we have a hand up. Koki, I'm really bad. You'll have to tell me how you pronounce your name. What's your question?
I hear you. Good morning, guys. After evening, sorry, man. Darren, I just want to find out.
No problem, man.
I hear you always talk about the Constitution. Then, what example can you give if you say you need to state the Constitution followed by a relevant case, or the case that you can rely on to justify the choice of the Constitution? What is the example? Can you give an example?
Okay. Yes. So when we go through the actual exam paper now, I've made notes on there as an example of how to do it. But what I mean is, when we're talking about, let's say a question says, is the Constitution the supreme law of the land, or does Parliament have the final say in law? My first thinking here is, right, first things first, what does the Constitution say? Section 2 of the Constitution is the supremacy clause. It says that the Constitution is the highest law of the land. So that's what I mean. So when I start my answer now to this question of whether it's parliamentary or constitutional, which one's supreme, my first thing is going to be Section 2 of the Constitution states that the Constitution is the highest rule of the land, and anything that's inconsistent with it is invalid. I will then go on to say, for instance, in case law ABC, the courts reaffirm that it's a preeminent source of law, and so on. So when I say that we need to focus on it or go to it first, that's what I'm talking about. When we read the question, what's the first thing that pops in your mind, and how does the Constitution address it? But I have made notes now in the actual exam paper, and I'll show you how you can apply that in the actual exam. So we've gone through the other notes we can on the exam paper. So hopefully that will answer your question a bit more detailed or practically on how to do it. But if it doesn't, you can always pop your hand up and we'll do it again. But we can go through the paper now if everyone is ready.
Okay, so you mean I will have to look for the rule of law in parallel with the Constitution, then I can follow the case law that is below the
That's correct. So you're going to be looking up first and foremost, what does it say? followed by your case law. So when we're talking about the rule of law, and there was a question asking about it, the first thing I would write is, okay, the Constitution, Section 2 says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Therefore, everything must be in line with the Constitution and its principles. I would then follow on with perhaps the Fedshaw one and saying that, as was discussed in such and such Judicial case at paragraph 27, the judges reiterated that every act that the government does has to be in line with the rule of law and it cannot exceed its powers. So there you go. Start with the Constitution, because the Constitution is where all the power for our law flows from. The Constitution empowers every other legislation. We always start with the Constitution, and especially being a constitutional module, they want to see, do we understand the Constitution? So we're going to say, yes, we understand the Constitution. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to reference the Constitution. So in this case, Section 2 is the supremacy clause. It tells us that the Constitution is the highest law of the land. But you know what? We're pretty smart students. We've also got some case law to back it up. We've got the Fedshaw case, we've got the pharmaceuticals one, and then you wrap it all together.
Thank you very much, sir. Now you confirmed what
Perfect.
I want. Thank you very much, sir.
100%. All right, so what I think we'll do is just to get the ball rolling, and if anyone's nervous, well, hopefully this will help them be not so nervous, because it's always good to do a bit more interaction. I enjoy it as well when there's a bit more interaction. So I think we'll start with a couple of true or false questions. I've made a compilation from like the last 10 years worth of papers, and we'll just go through a few of them. So these are marked as true or false. In your exam, they may say true or false, or give one-word answer or something similar along those lines. But I've just compiled them for us. True or false, these are worth 1 mark. So we're not writing huge essays. If you get a true or false thing worth 1 mark in the exam, we want a paragraph. You know, just give us 2 or 3 sentences that adequately answer the question. Don't go and write half a page worth. It's not worth 1 mark. So I'll do the first one, and then we can see if anyone wants to take a jump in and answer some of them. So let me, okay, so these ones are separate. Okay, so your first question would be, traditional courts are not recognized under the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa because they are still regarded by egregious apartheid law, the Black Administration Act. So, true or false? Is it false?
That's false.
I'm not expecting you to know it offhand, but do you know why it's false? You don't have to give me the section numbers or anything along those lines, but could you give me an idea?
The whatever courts that you mentioned are recognized by the Constitution because they can give decisions.
Yes. So the Constitution in Section 211 recognizes African customary law, and that if that law is at play, then the courts have to respect that law and work within that law. Obviously, as long as it's constitutional, the courts are allowed to interpret disputes within customary law. So 100%. The next one is the Constitution of South Africa is a flexible constitution. Now, I'm not sure if you guys remember that section or if you've covered that. There's a section in the prescribed book where it talks about the differences in constitutions. Some are flexible, some are inflexible. Does anyone want to take a guess as to whether the South African Constitution is flexible or inflexible? Yes, I see we have a hand. Mabitsela.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
I am good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I was not raising my hand regarding the question that you asked. I was asking where are you getting those questions that you are giving out?
Okay, so the ones that I'm asking now, I've just compiled them from previous question papers. If you go to the study website, the unisastudents.org.za, all these past papers are on the website. So you're more than welcome to go and download them and work through them and practice them. That's actually what I did when I was preparing for the exam. Is I went and found, I think there's about 12 or 14 years worth of constitutional law past papers. I went through each and every one of those ones, and then I found the theme that flowed through all of them. And like, for instance, every exam was asking about legality. Every exam was asking about separation of powers and so on. So what I ended up doing was I compiled these questions based on what I found was a recurring theme in the past papers. But you're more than welcome to go to the study website. It's unisastudents.org.za. and you can go and download all those past papers if you want to have a go at them. If you're on the WhatsApp study group, I'll drop the link there as well for you, and then you can go through, but it's unisastudents.org.za.
Okay, please kindly drop the link. I'm in the WhatsApp group.
Okay, well, I won't drop it now because I'm obviously going through this. Maybe one of the other guys, if they're on the group, they can just drop the link for you. Otherwise, I'll do it after the session.
Is it an open book?
The exam is what they call semi-open, as in you are allowed to have access to your prescribed book, your study guide, and the Constitution. Those are the three sources that you are allowed to. Obviously, if you have to reference case law, you can, but you're not allowed to just go and Google answers on the internet, but you are allowed to access the Constitution, your prescribed book, and the study guide. Just remember that when you are referencing, they don't like you referencing the study guide and the prescribed book. If possible, you need to reference the Constitution, legislation, and case law. So if you can't find anything anywhere else and your answer can only be found in the prescribed book and you run out of time to look for the legislation, then obviously you can reference the textbook, but you do need to primarily be referencing legislation, Constitution, and case law.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right. So the question again for the Constitution of South Africa, is it flexible or inflexible? So you won't find an answer to this in the Constitution itself. This is more of an academic question. So when you answer this one in the exam, you would probably, what I would do is I'd reference the textbook because this is an academic question, not a legal question. But does anyone know, for instance, if it's a flexible or inflexible?
Sorry,
Yes.
the network was a bit distorted. What was the question? Is what flexible?
Okay, so the question is, the Constitution of South Africa is a flexible constitution. Is that true or false?
I think it's true.
Yeah. But now remember, you've got to give a reason for it. I won't let you off the hook too easy. Eh? You don't have to quote me page numbers, but maybe just give me your understanding of why you think it would be true or false.
Okay. Okay. I feel put on the spot.
No, I don't feel put on the spot.
But
Okay.
just maybe to take a step at it, I would say it's flexible. And my reasoning behind it being flexible is it's not. It's gonna lie and say it's not too rigid, but I don't have any other backing.
It's fun. Eh? See, these questions are good because they make you think. And the best thing is when you think about it like this, you don't forget very easily. So come the exam, if you get a similar question, you'll be like, man, I know this answer. Yes,
no,
we have a hand up.
The Constitution, not the courts, ne? No, I think it's not. Actually, now that I'm thinking
it's
about
the
it.
Constitution. So the Constitution of South Africa, 1996, so the final Constitution. Is it flexible or inflexible?
I'm going to change my mind to inflexible. And primarily because it is there to protect the rights of it's there to protect its citizens, and in order for anything to be overturned there, it's not easy. So I would classify it as like rigid or hard, so inflexible.
Yep, that's the correct answer. So the correct answer is false. It's not a flexible constitution. And the reason being is it requires special procedures and special majorities to amend. It doesn't just take a 50% plus one vote. Some sections require a 2/3 vote. Some sections require 75% vote. And as you said, it's done in that way to protect those rights and then not make them be easily amended or adjusted. So spot on there. The question is false. All right, maybe we'll do one more. Let's see, where's an easy one? Okay, how about this one? The Supreme Court of Appeal may decide disputes between organs of state in the national or provincial spheres concerning the functional status of any of those organs of state. Do you think that's a true or false statement? So the question is, the Supreme Court of Appeal may decide disputes between organs of state. Is it true or false? All right, so that one there is false.
Sorry.
Only the concept.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I was gonna say, please repeat the question again. My network is a bit distorted at the side.
All right, so the question is, the Supreme Court of Appeal may decide disputes between organs of state. So the
No.
answer for that one, that's correct. So the answer is no. Do you know why it is false?
Because they operate independently.
Okay, almost. So the reason that it's false is that the Constitutional Court is the only one that's allowed to decide disputes between organs of state. Section 167 of the Constitution says that if there is a dispute between an organ of state, so in other words, between, let's say, the provincial government and the national government, only the Constitutional Court is allowed to decide those disputes. So in the Constitution, that's reserved specifically for the Constitutional Court. The High Court, Magistrates Court, or Supreme Court of Appeal are not allowed to hear those types of cases. So almost, so you would have got half a mark at least for the answer, and maybe not half a mark for the other part, but at least you would have got half a mark, which is, and for CSL, every half a mark counts. So you want to make that 50%? There you go. Oh. All right, let me just see if I can share my screen, and I'll pull up the, let's see. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yay, Teams is working tonight. Okay, so you should be able to see the past paper that I have up at the moment. This is the October 2024 past paper, the one that's on WhatsApp. So this is the one that we'll work through, and then I'll show you more or less how to go about answering each of these. You guys ready?
Then it could be me, but I can see the Teams pop up only. Is it just me, or can people see the question paper?
Okay.
I don't see the paper. I only see the screen. I don't see any paper.
Yeah, we also see the Teams screen. Do you have multiple screens open?
Team screen. And no, I've just got the one on my laptop. I'm just going to try and see. Let's see, why is it not showing? Let me just stop sharing and then retry again.
Maybe the question should have been, is there anyone who could see the question paper?
Okay, is there anyone who can see the question paper now?
Just one moment. Things are happening, but we're not sure what things are at the moment.
There's not. There is absolutely nothing on this.
It's just blank now. It upgraded to being blank.
Oh, it upgraded to being blank. Oh, okay. Let me see. Why is this not working? Because on my side, it's showing up that it's highlighted the screen, but I don't know why it's not.
Wait.
It's still blank at the moment.
Yeah, it's just blank. Maybe try and share like you did the first time.
Let's try that again. All right, I've told it to share the screen. Is it showing anything up on that side?
No. I don't see it. It could just be me, but oh yeah, there.
Yeah.
Is it showing up?
Yeah, boo.
Yes.
Oh, yay. It's funny work. Technology is awesome when it works, eh? When it doesn't work, oh, it's a different story. All right, so you guys can see the question one.
Hi, on my side, I can't see anything.
Same here. I can't see anything. It showed and then it went blank again.
Maybe just close the tab and open again. No, not you, Darren.
Oh. All right, I've told teams to reshare that window, so it should be up again.
It's blank
Or at
now,
least it's
but let's
telling me
just
that it's
wait.
up.
Let's wait for it, because it took some time then. Yes, I can see something. Can everybody see something too?
Yes.
Yep.
No.
Ma'am, is it just her? Darren,
No,
don't
I
close.
can see.
Sylvia,
Okay,
so
well, I
it's
see
just
thumbs
you.
up coming.
Yeah,
So I'm
now I
assuming
can
most
see.
of you guys can see the screen.
Yeah,
Hi
Oh,
guys.
now I can see.
I think for those that can't see it, oh sorry. I think for those that can't see it, just wait it out a bit. Either close your tab and then reopen and then just wait it out. Because I
yes.
wait like about a minute for mine to show. Thank you.
Okay. Otherwise, I have shared the paper on the WhatsApp group. You are welcome to open it up on WhatsApp and you can read through. But what I'll do as well is I'll read the question through, and then those that can see the screen, at least you can read along. But for those that can't see the question, I'll read it out to you, and then we can take it from there. Okay, so this is from the October 2024 exam. And question 1 is a multiple point question. It's only worth 2 marks or 3 marks. So we're not going to go and write paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of information. We are probably going to answer this in 1 paragraph. So the first question, question 1, 1.1 says, read the paragraph below. Is the information true? And then important to note here is we have to explain our answer. So we can't just say true or false. We have to give reasons as to why it is true or false. So the question says, the results of each general election have significant consequences. If the majority party loses an election, everyone in government must resign, including the public administration and the members of the public service. Thus, the officials within the public administration who do the core work of government's work and implement the political decisions taken by members of the executive, as well as those persons who work for national and provincial government departments, must resign and be replaced by individuals representing the new political parties within the coalition that is formed. So now we have to say, is this a true statement, a false statement? And then we have to explain why it's true or false. Now, obviously, for the purposes of the exam prep, I'm not expecting everyone to be able to quote sections and case law and things like that. So what I would like is if it that thinks they can answer it, even if it's true or false, and you don't necessarily have all the legislative and case law details, it's not a problem. Just, it's true because of ABC or it's false because of ABC. And then what I'll do is I'll fill in the actual information that would be used to answer this question. So does anyone perhaps want to try on this if it's true or false and then give a basic reasoning for why they think that? Oh, that's quiet. I can hear the crickets.
Okay, Darren, sorry. I think I'll give it a try. I have an idea because I've seen this somewhere.
All right.
So I think it's false because there's about, not sure if it's 200 or 400 seats in parliament, right? So then
Okay.
just because a party lost or they didn't win the election doesn't mean that they don't get seats in government. So most of the parties, or not the majority, but the ones that win like a lot of seats, they still get to be in parliament. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's it.
Okay. All right. So with this particular one, what they actually ask, can you guys see my mouse on the screen by any chance? So can you see if I highlight text?
Now we can't see any highlighted, but I'm sure we could if you did. Now we can.
Okay. So the key word here when they're talking about this one is public administration and the public service. So they're actually the original one there with the question you write there, but this particular one they're asking about the public administration, meaning the people that are employed as public civil servants. So they don't belong to a particular political party. They're the ones who work in the Department of Education or the Department of Health and so on and so forth. So it's to do with the public administration and then also the public service. So these are like your director generals and the manager of such and such provincial health department and whatnot. So these people don't belong to a political party, but now they want to know, so do we replace all these people when a new majority party comes? So the way I would answer this question is I would start off by saying that government is formed by the majority political party in Parliament, and these political parties are voted in by the National Assembly, same as the lady was saying there, meaning that parties are not permanent members and they come and go. However, the public administration, public service are permanent employees of the state because they handle the day-to-day operations. So therefore, this statement is not true. Just because we change governments or we have elections doesn't mean that every single civil service employee must resign and be replaced by another civil service employee. And with regards to the Constitution, what would apply in this case is Section 195, which is the public administration section, and it has its own section in the Constitution, so it's not subservient to the political parties. So just because there's a new political party doesn't mean that everyone resigns. The only people that will resign are members of the executive and politicians. But people that are employed by the state to run the health department, the treasury, public works, etc., they won't lose their jobs. And then with regards to case law, we've got our Constitution, which would be Section 195. With regards to case law, I would put in President v. South African Rugby Union, 99, where it specifically says that the administration is that part of government which is primarily concerned with the implementation of legislation. In other words, they're not policymakers and they're not politicians. Does that sort of make sense for this question, how I went about it?
Yes.
Okay. So being 2 marks, that's probably is, and then obviously these are just bullet points. I mean, you make it look a bit prettier when you wrote it up in a paragraph, but I'd include something like Section 195, which talks about the public administration. I threw in a case law about the President v. South Africa, but you don't even have to use the case law in a 2-point question. You could merely answer it and say, you know what, Section 195 of the Constitution says that the public administration is its own entity, and just because politicians get voted out, doesn't mean that public employees lose their jobs. Okay, so question 1.2 is indicate whether the statement below is true or false. Explain your answer. So the rule of law as an enshrined value in the Constitution essentially means that all legislation in South Africa must be obeyed by everyone as long as Parliament has taken all the necessary procedural requirements in enacting the law, and no one should challenge any legislation that has been duly passed by Parliament. So this, I think, was spoken about in the textbook, and I think this was also done last year in Introduction to Law. So I'm not sure if anyone perhaps wants to take a try whether this is true or false.
I'll take a step. I'll say false. One, I'd say the rule of law is more about procedural correctness or procedural fairness. And how many marks is this again? Let's see, 3 marks.
This is 3 marks. So we'd be looking for maybe 3 points to include.
Okay, the first one is false. And
yes,
I hope that is a mark. And the second one is
you'll get a mark for the answer, yes.
So yeah, I'll say that so yeah, yes, it's about the procedural fairness or correctness of a rule, and it's an expression of the principle of legality and the fundamental of the constitutional law. And then maybe, just maybe, I could refer to the EFF case.
Okay, yeah, EFF one, yeah. Well, so you get a point for the first one because the statement is indeed false. The reason, though, is to do with parliamentary sovereignty. So they have a thing in here. So they say that all legislation must be obeyed by everyone as long as Parliament has taken procedural requirements. So what that means is Parliament can make any law they want, and so long as they tick the right boxes, everyone must obey it. So that's actually parliamentary sovereignty, which is what we had prior to 94. So in our answer to this one, we would say, for instance, the statement is false, and it's referring to parliamentary sovereignty. Now, remember, we're doing constitutional law. The first thing we need to do, find something in the Constitution. In this case, I would say that Section 2 of the Constitution, which is the supremacy clause, says that the Constitution is supreme, not Parliament. So anything inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid. So even though Parliament passes a law, takes all the necessary procedural requirements, and doesn't mean that everyone needs to obey if it's inconsistent, because we have constitutional supremacy, not parliamentary supremacy. So we're like Section 1 where courts declare a law unconstitutional and things along those. And so that would probably be roughly about 3 marks. So this one, it was actually like a red herring with where they're taking all the necessary procedural requirements. The thing they were actually sneaking in the back door there was Parliament can make the law and everyone must follow it, which is true to a certain degree, but it's not the supreme law. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, Mom.
Cool. I think I should redo this again. I think the second time around. You've been through the fire one. Right. So 1.3. How are you guys doing on time? I see that we are at 8 o'clock. Are you guys still okay to go, or do you want me to perhaps jump to one example of an essay so that those that do need to leave can at least have an example of answering an essay before having to leave? How are you guys doing for time?
Daryl, I think it's dependent on you. This session is recorded, so as far as you can push, I would appreciate it. And then those who need to go before a certain time, they can always refer to the recording.
Yes, it's fine.
All right. Okay. So what? Okay. So what I'll do then? Yeah. Okay. That's fine. We'll do that then. So we'll just move on to the next step, which is 1.3. I'll see if we can try and get the recording up, hopefully tomorrow. So then those that want to listen will be able to have a listen through on that. Okay, but number 1.3, we want to indicate whether the statements below are true or false. So in accordance with Chapter 3 of the Constitution, all 3 spheres of government are distinct, but instead of competing with each other, the Constitution envisages a cooperative relationship to deliver the vision of the Constitution. Sure, that's a mouthful. In other words, what they're asking for is, does the Constitution have a system in place that makes everyone work together to achieve the Constitutional's vision? Does anyone want to perhaps take a stab at that and see if they think it's true or false?
True.
Sorry?
It's true.
Yes, it is true. Do you know why it's true by any chance?
So the South African Constitution sets up 3 spheres of government, right? It's the national, provincial, and local. So according to Chapter 3 of the Constitution, these spheres are distinct and separate. However, instead of competing against one another, they are required to cooperate and work together in a supportive way to achieve the country's goals.
Oh, spot on, 100%. So you get all your marks for that one because you gave the section, you gave the right answer, and it was true. Hey, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So we'll have to do those gold stars like we were doing for Law of Persons, So you get 3 gold stars. Okay, so 1.4. In terms of the Constitution, the National Assembly is responsible for performing specific functions. Which function in the paragraph below is not correct? So, at the first sitting after an election, the National Assembly must appoint from among its members the President. The National Assembly must then embark on the task of considering and passing legislation, appointing commissions of inquiry, and holding the executive accountable. So now we know from the question that some of those are true and some of them is not. So which one do we think is not correct and why? So we've got three options. The first one they've listed is the National Assembly must embark on passing legislation, appointing commissions of inquiry, and holding the executive to account. So those are the three options that we have. Right. So this statement, or the statement that's incorrect in here, has to do with the appointment of commissions of inquiry. So they are correct that at the first sitting, the president gets elected according to Section 86. However, Section 84 of the Constitution says that the passing of or appointing of commissions is a presidential power. So when we answer this particular type of question, we would say that the incorrect function in this question relates to the appointment of commissions of inquiry, because Section 84F of the Constitution says that it's a presidential power to appoint a commission, and therefore the National Assembly can't do that. And then you get your 2 points. One, because you said that it was incorrect, and two, because you gave the section in the Constitution of where they could find that. So that would be your 2 points in this particular question. Sure, this is a multi-part one. So we're going to consider each of the following scenarios.
Darren?
Are you breaking up there?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Can you kindly please repeat 1.4? I heard that you said the incorrect one is the appointing commission of the inquiry. I didn't get everything. Can you please repeat 1.4?
To answer this, we would say that the incorrect function in this question relates to the appointments of commissions of inquiry. Section 84F of the Constitution says that it's a presidential power to appoint a commission of inquiry, and therefore the National Assembly cannot do that function. So that would be the answer to this question, because number one, we've said, because it's 2 marks. So number one, we've said that it's incorrect, so we get a mark for that. And then number two, we've specified the section in the Constitution, which is Section 84F, that says that it's the president who has the power to commission or appoint commissions of inquiry. The National Assembly can't do that. So that's the incorrect function in this statement. I assume you were able to have that section.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, so number 1.5. So these are 4 marks. So these ones you'd probably have to make a nice rounded paragraph to get your 4 marks and aim for maybe like 4 points in here if you can. So these ones want to know whether the action is valid or not based on the respective branch of government. So question A says that the Supreme Court of Appeal has recently held that the Fees on Higher Education Act, an act which was duly signed by the President, is invalid as it did not comply with the procedural requirements of public participation. Evidence to this effect was brought before the court, and the legislature actually conceded that they did not publish the bill for public comment because it was urgent. Would you say that the action taken by the particular branch of government was valid or invalid? And more or less, how would you back up your position if you've got one?
Darren, can you please go up? The question is cut.
Can you see it now? All right, so does anyone think that the action taken was valid or invalid? So this will be Parliament taking or enacting law. Okay, so in this instance, the action is invalid. Parliament is responsible for legislation according to Section 44. However, Parliament has to facilitate involvement in the legislative process as per Section 59. So those would be our constitutional principles that we would put into it. And then to back it up with case law, we could use, for instance, Doctors for Life versus the Speaker of the National Assembly, where at paragraph 235, that it actually says that all parties interested in legislation should feel that they're given a real opportunity to have say. And for bonus points, we could throw in another piece of case law. We could say Minister of Health versus New Click South Africa. At paragraph 630, the judge said that what matters is that at the end of the day, a reasonable opportunity is offered to members of the public and all interested parties about issues to have an adequate say. So, and on top of the legislature themselves admitted that they did not hold public participation. So in light of that, we would say that the action that the legislature took was invalid. So we've listed two sections of the Constitution, we've put in two pieces of case law, and we've given an answer as to whether the action was valid or invalid. Does that make sense with regards to how we came to answering that particular question? All right. I think what we will do is most of these questions are fairly similar, so we'll do one more like this and then we'll jump onto the essay questions. So this one should be fairly easy. You might not necessarily know this institution, but let's try the question B. So the president, as head of the executive, has requested that as part of the checks and balances, the judiciary must provide full and regular reports on matters on which they adjudicate, as well as provide reasons for their judgments, the failure of which will result in the dismissal of a judge. So this one should be fairly easy to answer, even if you don't know the particular section of the Constitution, but does anyone want to perhaps say whether this action is a valid action or invalid action that the president is wanting to do? All right, so if I was answering this particular question, I would probably start on Section 165 of the Constitution, which states that courts are independent. So now remember, whenever we're answering questions, the first thing we want to do is, what does the Constitution say? That's the first and foremost point we want to put in. So in this case, when I read this question, it was like, you know what, I remember the Constitution saying something about the judiciary is independent because it's its own branch of government. So there's something in the Constitution. So then what you'll do is you'll go look through the Constitution, you'll see, there we go. It's in Section 165(2), it says that courts are independent. So that would be my first point in answering this question is, according to Section 165, subsection 2 of the Constitution, the courts are independent.
And the following
and then you could go one
subsection,
step further for a bonus point.
The following subsection
Sorry?
says, the following subsection 165.3 says no person or organ of state may interfere with the functioning of the courts. So I would also add that one.
Is that not a subsection 3?
Yes, I'm saying I would also add that one.
Oh, there you go. You beat me to it. Exactly. Bonus points. There you go. Now you get a gold star. But yes, you would definitely include that because obviously 165 subsection 2 gives us our basis. The courts are independent. They're an independent branch of government. And then as you pointed out, 165 subsection 3, no person or organ of state may interfere in the functioning of the courts. Now, before we even go any further in this question, we already know, was the action valid or invalid? I mean, would you like the honors? Seeing that you came up with subsection 3?
I was going to say no, this request by the president is not valid. because it is in like gross violation of what the South African Constitution is standing up for. So I would say
100%.
no.
Yep, 100%. You're right there. His action is invalid. And that's before we even gone any further anywhere else. Just those two sections of the Constitution tell us it's invalid. But obviously we've got, 4 points. So we want to add in a couple of other things to go with it. So what I would advise is we're using section 165, subsections 2 and 3. That's the basis for our thing. We can even say that it's invalid. We could then go on a bit further and say that, subsection 4 says that the Constitution requires organs of state to protect the independence of the courts. And although the president's involved with appointing a judge, the president cannot unilaterally dismiss a judge, because that's the second half of the question. Section 176 of the Constitution says that a judge holds office until discharged from office by an act of parliament, and there are obviously specific procedures to go on. So in this instance, we would use section 165 of the Constitution and section 176 to answer both parts, because it's like a split question. The first one is they must answer to him on matters, and second one, if they don't. So that's where our 4 points would be, is on 165 subsection 2 subsection 3, and then on section 176 of the Constitution, where it says that a judge cannot just be fired. There are specific procedures that have to go through, but at least you nailed it head on with the action is invalid. Yeah. So is it making sense how we answer these sort of questions, how we get the information from the Constitution?
Yes, it does. And additionally to what you said to section 177 of the Constitution, I would also add that there are 2 grounds that a judge can be removed. It's through one, incapacity, like they have a physical or whatever illness that makes them incapable of making those decisions. 2, misconduct, like if they have unethical things or unethical behavior. So and also
yes.
the president himself, like Cupcake, he cannot by himself dismiss a judge for failing to comply with like illegal orders. I was gonna be political and say what Trump is doing now, but yes, in essence, what he is doing now.
Yeah, so when you come to answering the question, because it's 4 marks, as you said, you can include a couple more details on there to fill out the 4 marks. But as long as you keep those key details in for the first section, the court's independent. The second section with president can't just fire someone, you can then fill out with the rest of that to cover your 4 points. This sort of question being 4 marks, probably a paragraph and a half is probably what I would do to write. Basically, everything that we've spoken about now, to write it out neatly would probably be a paragraph and a half. One for each section, one to deal with the president demanding the judiciary account to him, and the second part of the question being he's going to fire or dismiss a judge if they don't follow it. So maybe 2 paragraphs at most, 1 paragraph for each question, but 100% with what you went there, you would probably get the 4 marks because you filled it out and explained it quite nicely. All right, let's try number C. It's in the same vein as B. So the legislature, as part of its checks and balances procedure, has requested that the Minister of Education should come before it and report on the problems affecting the education sector, particularly the lack of delivery of textbooks in certain parts of the country. So now this is a similar thing as in question B. The legislature are wanting to hold someone accountable. Now, what does anyone want to perhaps take a stab at? You have to give me section numbers and that sort of thing, but do you think this action would be valid or invalid?
I want to try, but I want to give my other learned colleagues an opportunity before I try.
All right, there you go. Now you're all in the hot seat, hey guys? Someone's got to jump up. And as I say, I'm not expecting section numbers and all this type of thing. Just for the purpose of this question, would you consider the action valid or invalid?
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
I would say valid. When we refer to section 55 of the Constitution, or now since you said we must use subsections 55, subsection 2A and B, where it talks about the National Assembly being able to provide mechanisms to ensure that all organs of state and the national sphere of government are accountable to it. And also maybe because it's 4 marks, also talk about the section 92 of the Constitution that speaks about members. Oh, subsection 2. Oh God, that talks about the members of cabinet that are like accountable collectively and individually to the parliament for the exercise of their power and to perform their functions. And maybe section 92.3 that talks about them also having full regular reports concerning matters under their control. So I'd mention those 2 parts of the Constitution. And I'm thinking now, what else can I mention? I'm out.
But that's a lot of information in there, and you would probably pass and get all 4 marks with that information, because it's shown that you understand the Constitution, you were able to find the information in the Constitution, and the information you provided was relevant to the question, and you answered the question that it was valid. So you'd probably get all 4 marks for that because you were able to back up why you said it was valid. So, I mean, that's excellent. So for the exam, what they're looking for is, can you find in the Constitution this information, and can you answer based on that information? So, I mean, that's excellent. The only other thing that you could possibly have added in here would have been case law. And for 4 marks, I don't know if it's worth the time looking up that case law, but just for information's sake, I did find some case law relating to this. In the UDM versus Speaker of the National Assembly, paragraph 10, the judge actually says that it falls on Parliament to oversee the performance of the President and the rest of the Cabinet and hold them accountable for the use of state power. So, I mean, there's even case law that deals with it, but it's unlikely that I probably in an exam would have looked up case law just because of the amount of time it would have taken for that 1 mark. But, I mean, you answered the question spot on. All right, question 2. So this is now worth 10 marks. So bearing in mind, 10 marks is probably, we're going to be looking at an essay now, roughly half a page to 1 page. So the first question, number 1, is a whole lot of smaller questions. So we're not doing a lot of writing for them. A paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs at most. We're now moving on to like questions 2, 3, and 4. These ones have substantially more marks, so they're going to expect us to write quite a bit more, and there's going to be more information needed in order to get all those marks. So as a quick rule of thumb, we're probably aiming for about a page's worth of information for question 2, because it's 10 marks. So question 2 is talking about the UNISA Student Parliament, and they want to pass a law talking about artificial intelligence for educational purposes, and they want to know that because it's similar to a real parliament, how would the steps go and the processes go in order to make a law? So this one I'm just going to read from my notes because all of this is in the Constitution, and it will save you time on this question for looking it up. But what they want us to do in here is to treat the UNISA Student Parliament, this institution, as if it was a parliamentary body. And if you look in the Constitution, there is a section there under Parliament where it shows you how they process the bills. So what we would do in this question is we would say, for instance, that because the UNISA Student Parliament is similar to a parliamentary body, it will follow the same laws or similar laws as those in the Constitution, which would be sections 73 and section 79 of the Constitution, which lays out how law should be passed. So in a nutshell, I would include, for instance, like seven steps. And this is just very, very rough work. Obviously, in the exam, you would make it look a bit prettier and you'd fill it out. But you would say that, for instance, number 1, the executive of the UNISA Student Parliament, they would formulate the policy, and then they would submit that policy to the student parliament. That's the first step. They're introducing legislation to the student parliament. The second step would be that the bill to create a new law dealing with these AI sources would be read into the student parliament, the same as what would happen in our national parliament. So this is what they call that first reading step. The next step would be then to refer this bill to the appropriate student committee that oversees this particular field. They would review it. They would get participation and involvement from the student body, from the institution, lecturers, and other interested parties. So their job is to canvass the public participation side and see what everyone has to say about it. Once they've done that, they would then take the bill, they'd send it back to the student parliament for debate and approval. If the student body approved it, it would then be sent to the president of the student council to sign off, the same as in the constitution with regards to normal bills. Should the student president sign off, this would then become a new law of the student parliament. However, there's an extra step that's in the constitution, which is what happens if the student president doesn't want to sign? So we would include that as part of this question. We would say, for instance, that, however, if the student president refused to sign it because they had a reservation about its compliance, that person could refer the bill back to the student parliament for them to reconsider. If the student parliament approved it again and then submitted it to the president, the student president has no other option but to sign it. So in essence, what we've done is we've taken those individual steps from the constitution and we've applied them to this question, and we are using the use of student parliament in place of the National Assembly. So we would be taking the steps from the constitution and just merely repackaging them for this particular question, and obviously being 10 points or 10 marks, we're going to come up with like 10 points formulating how we got to that point. So this particular one, as I said, I'll just read out because it's very rote to do. But I hope that makes sense with regards to how you apply it to that particular scenario. This one, on the other hand, is a little bit more involved. We're looking at 25 marks. So we're looking at substantially more writing, probably in the region of 2 pages. So in this one, they are asking us about separation of powers. They even quote a section in there where it says the whole case turns on the separation of powers. They're asking us to explain in detail how the separation of powers principle operates in South Africa, and then we apply this understanding to the case above. So it's quite challenging because in an exam, you have limited amount of time. So unless you've read this case prior to the exam, you've got to do some very, very quick reading. So we are now approaching this one as an essay. So we know that it's got to work with separation of powers. So if I was answering this, that's the first component of this essay that I would tackle. I would include the 3 arms of state and how they operate. I would include things of what their jurisdiction is. So similar to how when we started this session, we were talking about the separation of powers, the 3 branches, what they can and can't do. That would be the first part of this essay, is how do those things interact? What are their limitations of power and so on? Then part of this question is asking, how does this apply to the case? So this particular case is talking about the president unilaterally withdrawing South Africa from the Rome Statute, which was the International Criminal Court. It had to do with Zuma and what was that president who came through? He was supposed to have him arrested and he didn't arrest him, and there was this big hoo-ha over the whole thing. So the president, as head of the executive, signed a thing saying that we are withdrawing and sent that off to the RCC and whatnot, and the parliament, or in this case the DA, said that they can't do that because the president unilaterally made a legislative move. So when they ask us what is at stake, what's key about this case, the main point here was that the president decided to do a lawmaking function, because before the government can withdraw from the Rome Statute, it has to repeal the local law. Only once the local law was repealed could they then send their notification off to say that we want to remove ourselves from this particular statute. But that's not what happened here. What happened here was the president decided, I'm going to act basically outside of the law. I'm making this decision, and then I'm submitting it to Parliament to act as a rubber stamp. So that's sort of the bullet points of the case. So as I say, if I was writing this essay, I'd put a couple of pointers in. I start with an introduction, I'd put the conclusion in, and I'd put a couple of points. So the first point I'd put in this one is the separation of powers within a South African context. And that's where I would include what are the different branches of the state? How do they work? What are they responsible for? And the key thing is which section in the Constitution works for each of those ones. So which section works the judicial, which section talks about the legislative power of Parliament or the executive power of the president and so on. That would all be covered in like my first point. My second point in this essay might be like a very quick case summary. What happened in this case? So like I was just mentioning now, the president wanted to do A, B, C, but he jumped the gun, X, Y, Z, etc. And my third point would be applying this case and the theory of the separation of powers, which means that, for instance, we would say that Section 43 of the Constitution gives Parliament the exclusive legislative authority in the national sphere. So Parliament is the only one that can make law or repeal law. And because for us to withdraw from the Rome Statute, we had to repeal law, the president can't do anything, the executive can't do anything until the legislature have done their job. And so Section 44(1) says that the Parliament can pass any legislation, and Section 85 says that executive authority is in the president. So the president can't do anything until the legislature have passed that law. So you'd have to wrap all that up quite nicely and explain why the president was wrong. Why did the court say that the president was wrong? And in this case, we would say that the president was wrong because he overstepped his boundaries. He stepped on the boundaries of the legislature. You'd write a nice little paragraph about that. And then for case law, we have to include case law in these essays. We could include something like, or the certification of the Constitution. I had a note in there where they talk about how important it is for the powers of each different branch to be separated. You could include something along those lines. This essay is probably going to end up being a page and a half, I would imagine, but that's more or less how you would approach this particular question. There's two parts. The first one is what is the separation of powers? Write 2 or 3 headings for that one. Maybe not 3, maybe 1 or 2 headings for that one. And then you do 1 or 2 headings talking about how this case applies to the separation of powers, which in this case is the president's executive power stepped on the parliamentary legislative power. The executive basically told Parliament what to do, which, as we know, they can't do because we have the separation of power. I don't know if I perhaps explained that very well with regards to this question, but I don't know, is there any questions with how I phrased the answer to this particular one?
Sorry, I have a follow-up question to what we just discussed. So when we answering these essay like questions, we need to sort of separate. So recognize what the question needs. In this case, would be separation of power. So refer to. Is it how many case law do you recommend? 2, a minimum of 1.
The minimum is 1. The minimum is 1. I would obviously try and aim for 2 or 3 if you can, but obviously it depends on time and what you have available in the particular question. But the bare minimum would be 1, because Professor Lee is pretty strict about having case law as part of the question. So the minimum would be 1.
Okay, so define what the question requires, give the relevant case law, explain the case law, and then refer to the case law that you are given, like for this one, the DA one. Explain what the link between that law, that case, and the principalities they're talking about here, or the principle they're talking about here. Okay. This one is a little bit challenging
Yes.
for me, but I hear what you're saying.
Yes. So what they do, a lot of these questions are scenario based. So if you don't understand the scenario, it makes it very, very hard. So as you mentioned, they're wanting us to compare the principle of separation of powers and this case. So how is this case related to the principle of powers? What was the differences, or what was the connection between them? So in this particular case, the connection between them was the fact that the president, as the head of the executive, overstepped his boundaries and stepped on the legislative domain, because he tried to do something that the law did not allow him to do. So that's where we are now discussing the separation of powers, and we would say that the president couldn't do that because the president doesn't have the power to make law. Only the only parliament can make law, not the executive. So in this case, this particular case, the president overstepped his bounds, and that was wrong. That's really what this whole essay is summing up, but we obviously have to make it a bit nice. We can't just say the president was wrong.
Yeah. Okay. No.
So it's a lot of words just to say the president was wrong. He should have.
Yeah. Thank you, Dale.
So yeah. So it's the same now with like your next question. On question 4. So it's 20 marks. So maybe it won't be as long. But in this one, they say here that, for instance, this case is closely intertwined with a number of other cases dealing with the same facts, and there's a common denominator of this. So this one's a bit more challenging because they say that we need to thoroughly discuss. So not just briefly, we want to thoroughly discuss at least 2 related cases and include pertinent provisions of the Constitution. So this one's going to take quite a bit more work, and it's less marks. So it doesn't make much sense, but now we've got to go and find 2 cases that deal with this one. So this case was, I think this one was the motion of no confidence, where the UDM wanted to bring a motion of no confidence, and they wanted to make it if I remember correctly, it was a blind vote, which the speaker didn't want to do. They wanted it to be open and public. So now you've got to go and find other cases, find out what the common core or common denominator between them is. So in this case, the common denominator had to do with motions of no confidence. Now you've got to go find cases that involve that one. So cases that involve motions of no confidence could be, for instance, Mazibuko versus Sisulu. That one was also talking about motions of no confidence. We could use that one and this case as the bare minimum of our 2 cases, because it says at least 2 cases. So if we could find a third one, bonus points for us, but obviously depending on time, we might get stuck with just these 2 cases. We would say that the common denominator between all these cases is the fact that it deals with motions of no confidence in the president. The constitutional principle, because we always have to start with the Constitution, or we have to go back to the Constitution. What we could say in this case is Section 92(2) of the Constitution says that the executive is accountable to Parliament, which ties in with our motions of no confidence, because that's one way that Parliament can hold the president accountable. Section 55(2) specifically even says that Parliament can provide mechanisms to hold the executive accountable, which in this case is your motion of no confidence. And Section 102 spells it out, that a motion of no confidence can be cast in the president and the executive. So at least from a constitutional point of things, we've covered our bases. We've included like 3 sections of the Constitution. If we include like that Mazibuko case versus Sisulu, we've got our second piece of case law. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to look up a third one, but I'm sure there is another one out there. I'm sure one of the EFF cases also had to do with the speaker and motion of no confidence, but you could include that. So when I start this essay, I'd put in some headings. I put an introduction, just briefly outlining what this case was about and what we're doing. I'd put in a couple of headings. One would be, for instance, what is the common denominator between the cases? I'd have another heading where I discuss my case law, and then finally the conclusion, which just rounds it all up of how do all these cases fit together. That's probably how I'd approach this one, because then I've got an introduction, a conclusion. I've got like 3 or 4 headings. I've got my 3 sections of the Constitution, and I've got my 2 or 3 pieces of case law. And then it's just a matter of putting all of that together to, you know, to make it all look nice. But yeah, would that make sense, my approach with regards to answering this question? Or does somebody perhaps have another view of how they would go about answering this question?
I don't know what about my other peers what they think, but I'm following you with those 2 cases, that the UDM case and the economic freedom fighter versus Speaker of National Assembly 2016 case are intertwined. And we can use the facts of the case of Mazibuko and yeah, and Sisulu to show the intertwinedness of the 2 cases. I am struggling to find other cases, but we can say that they are all matched because the constitutional vested obligation of the National Assembly is to hold the executive accountable to the rule of law and the Constitution. So to maintain an oversight of the exercise of authority by the executive. When we look at the section 55, subsection 2 of the Constitution. And we can also mention that the facts of each case are that in the EFF EFF versus Speaker case, it was instituted against the Speaker of the National Assembly after the conclusion of the Nkandla report, which was done by the Public Protector, who is one of the established institutions according to Section 181, subsection 1.
Sure, and you got the subsection.
Yeah, the vested power is to investigate and to report any alleged improper conducts in the state's affairs. So referring to section 182. And also the Public Protector did conducted rather an investigation regarding complaints which were laid against the former President Zuma regarding the security upgrades in his home, and the report of the Public Protector does impose like some form of remedy or actions that can be taken against the president that ordered him to pay like a certain percentage of that money that he spent on the non-security measures and handed out that report to the president as well as the National Assembly. And we can also say that instead of upholding the rule of law by holding the president accountable, the National Assembly decided to disregard the findings of the Public Protector by launching an investigation committee and assigning the Minister of Police to investigate these findings. And we see that as a result, the president also decided to ignore the remedial actions, that were prescribed by the Public Protector, which the court then considered as a violation of the rule of law, and as well as the executive members' ethic codes. And then the court then also emphasized that the remedial actions that were prescribed by Barkema, the Public Protector, are binding and should always be adhered to. So I think in just that brief manner, or that brief summary of the case, we can we can add more things, but we can when we look at the other case, UDM, it relates to the EFF case, because different political parties in parliament approached the Constitutional Court to complain that despite the findings of the public protector and as well as the ruling of the court that the president violated the constitution, right? The National Assembly failed to hold the president accountable for his actions. And even after the motion for his removal was tabled in terms of section 8(9) of the constitution that makes provision for the impeachment, the National Assembly then still failed to follow procedure and to establish mechanisms to hold him, which is the executive or cupcake now, accountable. And the court then stated the failure to determine if the president violated the constitution is inconsistent with section 42 subsection 3, which then imposes the obligation of the National Assembly to represent the people who elected them into power and to ensure government by the people under the constitution, and as well as section 237, which then orders the constitutional obligations to be performed without any undue delay, which there was due delay. And obviously we can also look at section 55, which orders or provides mechanisms to hold executive accountable. And we can always look at the what do you call this? I think now I'm just talking too much. If any of my colleagues
Yeah, no,
wants to
but
add.
you're right. No, you're right. So you can start off with those cases because they're all intertwined and they're dealing with the same thing. It's to hold the president account. So, I mean, you've got quite a lot of information there. So you might actually find you want to trim that down a little bit, but it's really good. I don't know if anybody else perhaps has anything to add to that. Nobody else adding. But yeah, no,
So, but
so
in essence,
you've got
both of them, they wanted to hold the president accountable by removing him from office or getting him impeached.
Yes. Yeah, so it all came down to holding the president to account. So, I mean, you've got quite a bit of information there that you could do this. So, I mean, you're well on your way to acing this this question because at least you know all your material is there. You know the sections of the Constitution. So, and you've got case law. So, I mean, all you need to do is wrap this up into a bow, and you've got your 20 marks for this particular question. So, I mean, that's excellent. Yeah. So, including the Constitution, include that case and show how they are all connected. And then in your conclusion, you can just wrap it up. And I mean, basically, there's your 20 marks done.
I hope so too.
So I didn't even have to put any of my other notes in. No, you've got that 100%. I didn't even need to worry about any of the rest of the notes for this question because you covered all of them. So, no, that's excellent. So really, the entire exam comes down to what does the Constitution say? And can you back it up with case law? So as long as you can find it in the Constitution and you can hopefully find some case law, you'll do well on the exam. So this is the last question on this paper. So we can maybe go through this one and then we can call it a night. So question 5, this is the last one for the October 24 exam. It says that a quasi-federal system is defined as a system in which the power to pass and implement legislation is distributed between the national government and provincial governments, but in which the power of provincial governments is limited. However, it can be argued that this definition does not go far enough to properly explain South Africa's system of multi-sphere government. With specific reference to the case of City of Tshwane Metropolitan Municipality, the AfriForum and another, as well as relevant parts of the Constitution and any other applicable case law, explain what is different about South Africa's system of multi-sphere governance. Which fundamental principles, doctrines, or theories are not expressly included in this definition? So there are 3 parts, I'd say, to this question. Does anyone want to take an idea as to the different parts of this question, or how many parts there are to this question, and can you identify the questions in the scenario? So I'll give you the first one. So the first part of this question is talking about a quasi-federal system. So in other words, it's a type of federal system. That's a particular question that they've asked us. So that's the one component of this question. There's at least one more, maybe two if we divide the last one up. Any takers?
I want to try, but at this point, I'm feeling a little bit insecure, guys.
Time for bed.
I want to try, but
No,
I feel
100%.
like I'm
Okay,
not
so
giving it. Let me give others a chance. If no one takes it, I'll try.
all right. There you go, everyone else. We're going to put somebody else in the hot seat. We've got our first part of this question, which is we've got to answer or talk about a federal type system. There's at least one other component, maybe two, depending how we divide the question. Can someone perhaps find the other part to this question that we've got to answer? We'll even make it 2 gold stars for the brave person that decides to take a stab at it. Sure. Well, I guess Lulu will have to take it for the team.
I have not fully. I don't want to say fully. I don't want to say don't fully get it, but I'm gonna give it a try. Eh? So the what do you call this? The quasi-federal
Yes,
system.
quasi.
Yes, it is a system in which the power to pass and implement legislation or law is distributed between the national and the provincial government, but which the power of the provincial government is then limited according to Section 40 of the Constitution. So in Section 40, we then learn that of the Constitution, we then learn that that although like these spheres are distinctive and that they are interdependent and interrelated, like meaning that they have different functions, but they yet coexist and still share like similar goals, which is to make provision for a effective constitutional government regarding the exercise of power in the Republic and adhere to these principles that are provided in the Constitution at all times. We learn that the characteristics of this multi-sphere governance are like a strict division of power between different spheres, and each level has exclusive powers and few concurrent powers. Some matters are exclusively allocated to one model, and most matters are concurrent, and implementation is done by different spheres or different civil services or state departments. And implementation is done by provincial or local. And in each sphere, it has its own constitutional functions and powers that must be or that must exercise by adhering to Section 41, which requires, like amongst other things, for us for like to be loyal to the Constitution, respect the Constitution, the constitutional status, institutions, powers, and the functions of the government and in its spheres, and not encroach on other spheres, and cooperate with one another in a mutual and trust and good faith manner. And in accordance, it promotes respect and coordination. Section 4130 also, like it makes provision, for intergovernmental disputes amongst the state or the organ of state by advising, or it orders them to find, sorry, or use other alternatives or procedures that are specifically established for that purpose. And to maybe like assist in settling or to remedy disputes before ever even thinking of approaching the court. And organizations like Chapter 9 of the institution, your Electoral Commission, the South African Human Rights Commission, the Gender Commission, and yeah, that's just the quasi system, quasi federal system, right?
Quasi federal, yes.
Yes, and yeah, sorry.
You're right there. So when they say quasi-federal, it means quasi just means so it's similar to a federal system. So you were right there with listing how the different spheres work together. So to my mind, if I had to compare them, a well-known federal system would be the United States. So the United States is what they call a federal republic. Each of their states have their own independent constitution, and they're all agreed to work together to make a federal government. And then they would follow certain rules that were made by the federal government and certain rules that are made by the state government. So that's a federal system. There's a clear demarc of who can do what and who has what powers. So I would, to add on to what you've already said, I would probably put in there, the reason it's a quasi-federal system is because we don't have that clearly defined structure like the states have. As you mentioned, our different spheres of government have to work together. It's cooperative government, and not everything is black and white. Some areas, as you mentioned, you've got to work together on they have dual jurisdiction over them. I would probably include like the schedules 4 and 5 from the Constitution, which delineate the different functions that the national sphere can do and the provincial sphere can do, just sort of that quasi-federal system. But you were definitely spot on with mentioning different ones. I don't know if I would go as far as listing the state institutions supporting democracy, like your Chapter 9s. I'm not sure how I would work that in, but the other parts that you mentioned were definitely spot on, especially including like Section 41 or Section 40 of the Constitution, because those were our marks. So we always go back to the Constitution. So I'm glad you did mention those, and even the subsections. They will appreciate that. Yeah, no, definitely. Overall, you hit that nail on the head. I'm not sure if between you and me, we've quite hit the 15 mark.
I don't
level,
think so.
But I'm sure
I did not touch on the case of City of Tshwane. Yeah.
So that case there was talking about these road signs being changed, and there was a dispute between AfriForum and the Metro because there was an agreement made they wouldn't do something, then they did something, and in any case it came down to them wanting to change the road signs, and they ended up in court, and the court was basically saying that there is a separation of powers and we've got to respect what each sphere of government is allowed to do. So that's what the case was talking about. So in this particular case, they're saying we must, with specific reference, in other words, they want us to find a paragraph in this case that talks about a federal system, which is a separation of powers. So on my little notes, I did have a quick look through the case. I would probably pull up paragraph like 47, where the judge refers to the separation of powers, and you've got to keep that in mind when dealing with these things. So for this particular case, being limited on time, not being able to read the entire case to its fullest, I would probably, in amongst our Constitution sections like 40, 41, I'd throw in this one at paragraph 47 so that we can tick the box of with specific reference to this case. Because obviously if we don't include something with specific reference to this case, we are going to lose some marks. So we need to include something. So I would probably put that in as well. But I mean, overall, I would say that with what you've mentioned there, including the Constitution, the way you've explained it and whatnot, that's got to at least be worth half the marks for this question. So I would say that, you know, at least you've got to that halfway mark. By the time you discuss the case, maybe, you know, you might be at 15 out of 20 points, you know, because between the two of us, we've discussed enough with 20 marks. But I think between the two of us, we could maybe, you know, make that 15 mark and get a distinction, 75 for this question.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you added that paragraph, that I would also add paragraph 58. The court further stated that AfriForum, they needed to accept Black people as fellow human beings who deserve human dignity and equality as part of pursuit of justice and freedom in the Republic. So, and maybe 67 that talks about co-governance and equal sharing of executive budgetary responsibilities. So yeah.
No, I think if you're going to use, I think you said it was paragraph 50 with regards to Black South Africans and whatnot. I think if you're going to use that one, you probably have to word it in, because obviously now it's talking about equality. So if I use that one, what I would probably say is, with regards to separation of powers, the provincial government, or in this case, the local government, needs to implement the Constitution, and part of the Constitution does recognize redress for the past and treating everyone equally and giving recognition to different sectors and whatnot. And in line with that, and with its ability or with its authority in its particular section of power, its sphere of government, it's implementing the Constitution by changing those road names which give effect to dignity, etc. So if you do the dignity route and the equality route, you just have to word it in such a way that it brings that sphere of government or that separation of powers into it somehow. But that's probably how I would word that. And if you were going to use 50, it does work. You just got to do a little bit of work around to implement it. But I mean, it will work.
Yeah, because you can also do paragraph 2, like as part of decolonizing South Africa. Or South African constitutional law, and to honor the heritage of indigenous heroes and achieve national unity to create reconciliation and heal the injustices of the past by recognizing and fixing the oppressions that once suffered because of apartheid. So you could also use paragraph 2. So I think I'm struggling with comprehension and maybe substantiating each case law with the relevant subsection. My God, I have a lot of work in my hands. Okay.
Hey, but at least that, I mean, that's what the point of tonight is, just to sort of give you an idea of what to expect, because there's nothing worse. I mean, when I went into the exam, I mean, I had no idea. I read some past papers, I'd done a bit of research on case law, but when past papers was like, this is a lot more involved. This is much deeper thought than what I was thinking I'd have to do. Because even going over past papers, it's not quite the same thing as, boom, here's the scenario, you got 4 hours, go for it. Yeah. So at least you have an idea more or less of how to approach it. It would have been nice if we'd had a bit more, exam prep just for myself, like someone had come along and said, hey, make sure you answer the Constitution first and foremost, then do case law. So yeah, so I mean, if that helps you guys, I mean, I would say definitely start with your case law or your Constitution first, find those principles, put those sections down, and then back it up with case law, because that's where the majority of marks are. And I had to learn the hard way. I had to really work through my assignments and then get the feedback and thinking, man, why didn't they just explain us this is what they wanted us to do? So at least by the time the exam came along, I already had the idea, no, Constitution first and foremost. And I mean, I passed first time, so I know there are a lot of people saying that they failed and they're doing it 5 and 6 times over. And I mean, it must be very disheartening to be in that boat. But working together, we can get through that. And by focusing on what I would consider the key principles, which is Constitution first and foremost, what is it that this principle relates to in the Constitution, which section, which subsection, whatever the case is, put that down, include as much from the Constitution as you can. I mean, with the local government, you were listing sections 40, 41, and so on. It's good because it shows the lecturer that you've read the Constitution, you know what's in the Constitution, and you know how to apply it. And then backing it up with the case law, mentioning the paragraphs that you did. I mean, that all goes towards extra. Every mark counts, and you'll see that, you can pass this, and it'll be in the rearview mirror. So next year, you don't have to worry about this again. But
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if there are any other questions to the exam or approach this module. If there's anything along those lines, yeah, I don't know if there are any other questions. Yes, Durangwa, we have a question. I hope I'm saying your name right there.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, are we going to have more of these classes? Like, when is the next class? And is it possible for us to have something about the 3 government spheres?
All right. I did cover the 3 spheres of government at the beginning. But with regards to your question about another class, I haven't scheduled another one. If you guys want to go through more past papers, or if you want to work through other ones that I've got, I don't mind doing another class. It just depends what you guys are expecting or what you're wanting to do. I think from the key points side of things, I think we've covered what's important with regards to approaching the exam. You know, constitution, first and foremost, then we do case law, and then we make pretty essays. So I think from that side of things, we covered. But I mean, if you guys want to do more past papers together, I don't mind doing that. You'll just have to let me know. So I don't know if this is helpful, or if it's something you guys would prefer to work through in your own papers, or if me making notes on how I'd answer these essay questions helps. But I mean, if it helps, I don't mind doing another class. You just have to let me know, and then we can see if we can put another one together.
Darren, can you please have another class? This is so helpful. I don't want to lie. Can you maybe do the first semester question paper? May, June 2025. Maybe if you can maybe go through it, and maybe you know.
Daryl, I think maybe
Okay, yeah, no problem.
We can stop the recording, because now we're done covering the other stuff.
Okay, let me just do that quickly.
Thank you.
All right, we've stopped the recording there. All right. Okay.